My favorite writer is David Sedaris, and I like his humor and his candor, and just he has just powerful prose because it's so colorful. And so what I'll do tonight is read 2 of these vignettes, and I'll try to get here every Monday night over the next 4 weeks and read a couple. And you know, it's interesting. You can write something and edit it, but until you hear it, until you read it, and you don't know how it flows or how it comes together. So we're all going to find out, because this is the first time I've read this thing. So the title of this little piece is "Never Eat the Liver of a Polar Bear." After completing flight training, I went through the Air Force Arctic Survival School in Nevada. The training took place in the Sierra above the tree line in February. The idea was that you had an emergency bailout and had landed on an ice floe in the Arctic. You had a parachute, a sleeping bag, a .22 caliber rifle with 6 rounds, which came in 2 pieces. You assembled this little toy as if it was Christmas morning. There was a ground school also, which involved a live rabbit, snowshoes, burrowing under the snow each afternoon, stripping off all clothing, crawling into 2 down sleeping bags, hunkering down and waiting for the sun to emerge the next morning. For a city boy, this was a trip, especially staring out of your isolated snow hole at the star-filled skies, close to God. In addition to these field exercises, there was and mind-expanding programs and problems, we had a ground school. The classroom instruction covered the fine points of survival science. Being the military, everything and everybody was tested and ranked. My class members consisted of special ops flight officers. The instructors were senior non-coms. These sergeants were rated on how well their class did on the standard test. Hence, there was a convention that when a factoid was to appear on a test as a question, the instructor would stomp the floor to make sure the point was duly noted. So this morning, when the sergeant said, "Never eat the liver of a polar bear," he stomped not once, but twice. Now the backstory, as I understand it, was that a couple of Norwegian Arctic explorers crashed their air balloon shortly after takeoff. When these stiffs, as in frozen, were discovered some years later, the autopsy found that they had succumbed to an overdose of vitamin A, which was alleged to be in the liver of a polar bear, which had allegedly been consumed by these dead Nordic guys. I believe it was the second stomp that put me over the edge. I started to smile and then laugh. The sergeant seemed agitated and said, "Lieutenant, what's so gosh darn funny?" I could have let it go, but I was beginning to exceed my tolerance for Air Force training, so I explained to him that as I understood my situation, I had just bailed out of my fiery plane, landed all alone on this ice floe, the wind was whipping up my ass, and I saw some movement off in the distance. I stared through the haze and made out a polar bear, his nose in the air, advancing. This ton of romping romance was making a beeline toward me. I was fumbling in the frigid cold to screw the barrel into my toy gun and trying to remember where I'd hid the .22s. Salivating, I contemplated my first bite of his liver, which we all know to be an Arctic delicacy. Then in the back of my mind, a foot stomped. I remembered just in time, never eat the liver of a polar bear. So, for the sake of argument, let's say I was very hungry and just wanted a wing or a drumstick. How, I asked the sergeant, was I to proceed? Now, some of my colleagues grasped the value of my proposition, but not the sergeant, who said, "Okay, you guys entertain yourselves, I'll be right back." True to his word, in 5 minutes he appeared at the classroom door with the major, who summoned me into the hall. The major told me that the sergeant said I was laughing at him and disturbing the class. I made my case. The major failed to see the humor. On the contrary, he got all stiffened up and told me that there was a war on, and someday this instruction would save my life. He said I had two options. One, I could go in and apologize to the sergeant in front of the class, or two, and you never wanted to hear two because it involves an avalanche of shit. So on my way back to my seat, after making a heartfelt apology, I had an epiphany. I simply didn't fit. I had to find an exit strategy. Well, a year after successfully completing Arctic Survival School, I was sent to Vietnam. That's it. So I have another short read that I haven't had the chance really to edit much. I just did this afternoon. And this is called Black on Black. Again, these are vignettes of time in the service in the Air Force. I was at Conley Air Base in Texas for flight training in navigation, focused primarily on celestial and electronics. Toward the end of this year, long training, I went 90 miles up the road to Dallas to order a new car. This was my first new car with that new car smell that triggers something deep down in an American male. It was a 1963 Pontiac Le Mans 326, black with black interior and black upholstery. It was what we called in the neighborhood black on black. I'm not a motorhead, but this was my first real car, new and powerful. 2 weeks later, I got a pass to leave the base and take possession of this prize. I planned my route to slip in and out of Dallas without encountering the traffic associated with JFK's visit. As I accelerated up the freeway ramp to return to base, I remember listening to Bob Wills with the volume turned up on my new radio. The broadcast was interrupted. The announcer said President Kennedy had been shot. He was en route to the hospital. The day was gray, overcast with a light drizzle. The highway was open. So many cars and 18-wheelers pulled to the side of the road. Small groups of people huddled at intervals, a sense of loss being acted out on a grand scale. When I got to the base, the air policeman at the gate waved me to the side. He said the base commander wanted the next student officer in uniform entering to be detailed to lower the base flag to half staff. So I saluted the flag on that bleak, rainy day. I stood at attention with a detail of airmen all fighting to maintain their composure, with tears running down our cheeks. So November 22nd, 1963 was a big day in a number of ways. Thank you.